So first of all, I want to agree with Senator Romney. I came in here happy to vote yes on this self-flagellation. For my own part, what I did when I ran for office, I divested myself of all my marketable securities, turned them into cash. I've been sitting on cash. And you know how much I've lost in terms of opportunity cost since that point in time. So, from my standpoint, I was able to do that. I had the capability of doing that. I thought that'd be the honorable thing to do. My wife has since purchased an ETF, which this does exempt, and I think that's a good thing. I would caution people in terms of, I'm going to vote no now. We don't want to turn Congress into a rich man's club. I think it's already suffers from that. And again, I thought also, and I would want clarification, it's mainly the reason I'm asking this, is are private businesses exempt or not exempt from this? I was told, again, it's hard to interpret legislative language, but if, I had a rather large manufacturing company, which I did not divest myself immediately, I since have, but that would be grotesquely unfair. We're going to limit the number of people, by the way, qualified people. I actually want people with manufacturing experience or business experience, people who've been successful in life. I'd like to see successful people come to Congress and bring their successful skills to bear here. So, again, I agree with Senator Romney. Insider trading is already illegal. I don't know. I think there's all kinds of suspected abuse. A lot of people come into Congress and all of a sudden they're multimillionaires later. But I think we do need to exercise caution. But again, I'm primarily speaking at this point because I want clarification. Does this or does this not exempt a private company of somebody who's going to run for office or a member of Congress? I mean, all of a sudden, does that have to be divested? Because I think that'd be a travesty, quite honestly.
Is there an answer to that question?
The answer is that it's exempt if it's a small business as defined by the Small Business Administration.
So how small is small defined by? 500 and under. 500,000.
500 employees and under is a small business.
Yeah. Definitely put me down as no.
So let me ask a question. So if you have 1,000 employees and you own it and it's just your private business, you have to divest of that business?
Yep.
Well, that's insane. Yeah. I mean, who would want to do that? I mean, farms, family businesses have been going on for generations that they keep together, and sometimes families divide it by shares. We're going to make people divest of those privately owned businesses, and we think that's a good idea? I don't know. I mean, the thing is the popularity of voting for this to show you're against bad things is out there, but it's like, one of the senators today said that no congressperson should enrich themselves from illegally obtained information. That's not what this bill's about. This isn't about illegal information. This is about owning stock. This means you're criminalizing everybody who wants to own stock. There's potentially a 27th Amendment violation in this too, with taking people's salary. That's being adjudicated before the courts currently. But to vote against this sounds like, oh gosh, you're for corruption. Nobody's for corruption. There are laws we passed, and I voted for the Stock Act a couple of years ago, and the Stock Act helped to ban or further ban what was already illegal. It has always been illegal to do insider trading for anyone in Congress or otherwise. With the Stock Act, the way I understand it is we reaffirmed that. But I do fear that we're doing this, and I'm torn between the perception of how this vote will be and actually how badly the bill is written of what it will do. And did any of the authors of the bill have a comment on whether this would require President Trump to divest? Senator Hawley, do you know what the answer to that is?
Divest from what?
Stocks.
I don't know what the state of the former president's current portfolio is. Whoever is elected president would have multiple years to comply. But I do know there's always an excuse for why we can't do a stock trade bill. I've heard this for years. And now we're being told, oh, this was drafted hastily. That's just simply false. I mean, we've worked on this for literally years. So I would just welcome those who now suddenly have concerns where have you been for the last few years? And listen, I'm happy to work with you as this moves to the floor. We can always do a substitute amendment, that's fine. But I am 100% committed to banning stock trading by members of Congress. So I'm not going to be dissuaded from that one way or another. And we can throw up as much chaff as you want to, but the fact of the matter is, members of Congress should not be trading stock. They should not be. And I know that there are those on this panel who have never supported and are never going to support a stock trade ban. And that's completely fine. That's your prerogative. But let's not pretend that this is about anything other than that. That's what this is about.
But what about banning of owning of your business? I got a family, I don't, but let's say I have a family business and it's got 1,000 employees and I own it. I have to divest in that? Do you think that's a good part of your bill?
Is that the current, Mr. Chairman? Listen, again, I'm happy to work with anybody who has concerns on substance, who would actually like to get to a result on this and thinks it will improve it on the floor. I'm delighted to work with you on it.
Can I make a suggestion which would solve this? Don't force divestiture. You run for office, you have a stock portfolio, that's it. Now, you can't trade it. Okay, you can't buy more stocks and trade stocks, so you want to run for, you can hold on to your stocks, okay? You can always divest, okay? You can always buy an ETF. Don't force people to sell their business. Don't force them to sell stocks they already hold. Don't force divestiture. Once you're here, you can't be buying and selling. Again, I don't do it. I did divest. I turned it all into cash, okay? So that's how I handled myself. I don't want to force what I did and everybody else, though. Not everybody's in my position. I don't want to turn Congress into rich man's club. And by the way, I certainly don't want to impose this self-flagellation on other branches of government. We can do this to ourselves. I don't think we should do it to the executive branch or the judicial branch.
Can I just, Congress is a rich man's club. That's the problem. That's what we're trying to fix. I would suspect that I probably have the fewest assets of anybody sitting on this dais. I am not a rich man, unlike those to my left. So, I mean, listen, the American people look at people like the former Speaker of the House, who makes better returns than anybody in America. They look at senators who were investigated during the COVID pandemic for their miraculous stock trades, and they say, how is this possible? To think that this might become a problem in the future is frankly fanciful. It's a problem now. It is, and it's not just in perception, it is reality. Members of Congress are trading daily based on information that the public doesn't have. And now we've heard the insider trading. I understand that insider trading is banned, but let's be honest. Members of Congress get information that is technically not insider information as defined by the securities laws that is nevertheless extremely beneficial to know, and often we get it earlier than other people do. That's why senators rushed to trade stock at the beginning of the pandemic and were investigated for it. Ultimately couldn't be prosecuted because technically it wasn't a violation of the securities laws. Was it a good idea? No. Should it be happening? I submit that it should not be. So again, I just want to say to anybody who would like to support this bill but says I have concerns over technical aspects of the drafting, I hear you loud and clear, and I'm happy to work with you on that.
Answering your question, former President Trump owns 114 million shares of Trump Media and Technology Group Corp., worth $3.776 billion. He would be required to divest that. All right? That would be at a massive disadvantage for him. Not to mention his other investments. Yeah, so you have Senator Johnson has proposed, what makes a lot of sense, which is to say, if you have investments, you don't have to sell them to run for office. You can't trade. But I didn't say this bill wasn't drafted quickly or hastily. I said it was drafted poorly. All right, there are a number of things the bill does which ought to be done, which I would support. But causing people that are running for office, including the President of the United States, to have to divest of all their public and private enterprise securities is simply something that's a mistake and would prevent people from running from office, including the person who's the Republican nominee for president.
Senator Marshall, you're recognized for comments, and then Senator Langford, you're next.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly, I acknowledge the issue you all are describing, but I'm still going to support this bill. I think it's important enough that we get it to the next step, and hopefully the process can improve it. I would be impacted by the current legislation and have to divest myself of companies that we own prior to getting here. I agree with you completely, but I think this is so important. We need to move forward. My only wish is that we would have included spouses the moment it impacts us, because that's where it's being abused, is on spouses making some of these trades. When you have hundreds of thousands of people following a spouse's member of Congress through a Twitter feed, obviously there is a problem. So I'm ready to move forward with it. Appreciate everyone's efforts on this, and yes, it's got to be amended going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Langford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a person who's sitting to the left of Senator Hawley, we should put our bank accounts side by side and do some comparisons on it. As a former youth pastor, let me just ask a couple of questions on this. Senator Marshall, I think committee is the place to be able to hammer this out rather than between committee and the floor. Committees are designed to be able to have this kind of conversation to be able to figure it out. And my concern is this gives the perception of members of Congress are no longer trading, wink, wink, nod, nod, unless it's an ETF, unless it's a mutual fund, unless it's other things. So you can't trade Apple or Microsoft stock, but you could trade QQQ, which has a huge percentage in those, and basically do the same thing. That's allowed in this bill. And so if we're going to try to give the perception that this is blocking members of Congress from owning or trading stocks, but ignore this other part of the market where they're still able to play in the market in that area, I just think it's just not being consistent for us. That if we're going to say we're out of the market, then we're out of the market. If we're not, then let's find a way to manage this. The Stock Act, when we passed that, and I'm one of those that voted for it as well, the Stock Act said it's already illegal to be able to trade stocks with insider information. And to make sure that there's maximum amount of enforcement and transparency, everybody's got to disclose every transaction that you have over $1,000. It's all got to be out there in the public eye, and it's got to be immediate. And there is accountability on that. I would tell you, as a member of the Ethics Committee, we do get contacts from folks saying, there was this trade that happened, I saw it, I tracked it, they were in this committee at this time, they were in this meeting. So some of that dialogue does happen behind the scenes to be able to go through all that. It also, this bill would say that I couldn't own or trade stocks, but my chief of staff who set up the meeting, who actually met with those people first, now they could. The legislative person that sat in the meeting with me, when that inside conversation happened, they could trade on stocks, in fact, on that stock, but I couldn't. So it creates this very interesting, who's actually engaged in actually more inside information than us is our staff. And our staff are all exempted from this bill, saying they have access to all that information, but members of Congress actually cannot. And actually college-age kids are also exempt from this. So a dependent child of a member of Congress, they can't trade on the stock. But if they're 19, they could. And the whole issue of crypto that's come up, we haven't discussed here, but my understanding is this also would preclude a member of Congress from owning cryptocurrency as well. And that's a big conversation as well on the whole digital side of things that we haven't had discussion on. My issue is not this topic. I don't want anyone to be able to trade on inside information, which is already illegal. And I don't want to even create that perception of trading on that. But again, this is not trading, this is owning. And this has a lot of exceptions that are built into it that gives the perception of saying we're not involved in the market when we really are involved in the market, just in other places in the market. And oh, by the way, our staff's still involved in all that, but we're not. It just begs some questions that I think need to be answered. And I think the right place to answer it is in committee, to be able to argue through this and to be able to figure out what's the best way to write it and do it, rather than hoping it gets better when it gets to the floor.
Senator Scott.
So I'm similar to Senator Johnson. I sold my operating businesses, and many of them had more than 1,000 employees before I ran for the Senate. So, but it does make sense. I don't know, we don't want people to do any insider trading, but is there ability to amend the bill now to just say that it's not going to apply to what you own when you come into the Senate or whatever job there is? Because that might alleviate a lot of the concerns.
Consider that Johnson Amendment 1.
Johnson Amendment 1 does that?
No, he's
What's that?
saying it would be.
Will be. Well, we don't have an amendment to do that now, but you can always do a substitute to make those kinds of changes that we could vote on going forward. I think that's tough to do today, but the idea is that we know this process, we get it out of committee, there's still a lot of work that gets done. We take bills out of here, they get changed. It's not going to move if there are folks that can't be moving on UC, it's going to have difficulty moving if there's opposition, and we'll have to continue negotiations to get to a point where it can actually move. But I want to keep the process moving. I think it's important for us to keep the process moving, and we've done that in this committee.
How about next week? This meeting goes on until next week. Get it drafted and bring it to the meeting next week. Voting today is very awkward because I'm not going to vote for this bill the way it is because of the divestiture provision. But if instead we say people running for Congress can hold on to private assets and so forth and stocks, they can't trade them, then that's something I could support. But we don't want to vote no on a messaging bill that makes us look bad for acting like we're going to try and allow trading for members of Congress. But let's make the bill something we can vote for and have a positive statement coming out of our committee. So let's do that next week.
Let's do next week and allow the amendment next week.
Well, our amendments are in place right now, but we can do a substitute to have a further discussion on that. And there's a willingness of folks to vote for a bill if it has their amendments. You know, sometimes we have folks in this committee who will put amendments forward and still have no intention of voting for the bill. That's kind of a exercise that is not productive in my mind. But if it's something that would actually bring people to support something of substance, then we can try. But I think there's support for this legislation as it is right now in committee. And I'd like to be able to move it today and then continue to have the conversation to go forward.
Well, I'll offer a substitute amendment. I have Romney Amendment 1 is going to be voted on today. My substitute amendment will be that this provision does not apply to securities which are owned prior to the individual becoming a member of Congress or becoming president or vice president.
And private businesses as well.
Security and assets.
Security and assets.
We have not seen that amendment, Senator.
You just heard it. And if subsequent discussions need to improve it, fine. But I'm going to vote for it. I'm going to vote for it if that amendment is adopted. If the amendment is not adopted, you're going to see a lot of Republicans vote against it.